The only thing I can describe it was like student halls. So student accommodation, dorm rooms. And there would be 3 people in pretty much every single room in a corridor with about maybe 10 rooms or so. And to my understanding, they were all Credico employees across down the entire hall. They all knew each other. And I think that these were, flexible. So it wasn't a case of, so you live here now, here's your permanent address. It was a case that, you sleep here and you come to the office. And if we want to relocate the office, if we want you to move to Glasgow, to Manchester, to London, then you will move and you'll live in very similar accommodation.
Kris, you worked for a Credico subsidiary in the UK several years ago, a little bit different from what we've heard so far, because you were basically tasked with a group of other people to come up with a brand new pitch for a brand new campaign out of the blue. And in fact, you said on your first day, the day you started, was the day you started coming up with this pitch, which is kind of unique. But before we get to that, can you kind of just tell me how you got drawn into Credico and what you thought going through the interview process and that whole ordeal?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, where to start really? I graduated in like 2017. I had a lot of thinking to do about what I wanted to do with my life. I was actually had a temporary job at the time as well, so it wasn't like I was completely desperate for any source of income. It was a bit of a different story from that. It was a case of I got a call whilst I was working with these temporary jobs, and they gave me the whole line. Massive opportunity, earning potential, etc. You've heard it 1,000 times, and I'm sure heard that messaging, and it really resonated with me as quite an ambitious individual. Wanted to do a little bit more with myself. Wanted to, they didn't tell me about the running of the business to start with, but they said they were looking for people to kind of expand out. So that was a very interesting messaging that really resonated with me. I then turned up to the interview. I took a day off the temporary job and turned up to the interview, and immediate red flags. Office full of people, reception area with the receptionist just sat on the phone. What I realized afterwards is there was like a hallway out by the side as well, where lots of the admins would kind of be on the phone all the time as well. I only saw that after I got the job. So I turned up, interviewed with a guy that wasn't the owner of the office, but he was one of these assistant managers who was very quick in explaining, what potential is without actually saying what I'm going to be doing. Mm-hmm. So I was actually interested when they said a second round interview. I was interested in learning a little bit more about what I would be doing. And I'd not been on many interviews before. Previously, they'd been for fairly entry-level positions or even administrative jobs. So the responsibility wasn't, 2 interviews, 3 interviews. So that was fairly new to me. Went on to the second interview, probably I think the next day. So they pressured me into taking the next day and said, "So you're going to be available tomorrow, right?" The assumptive close on that one, and of course I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll be available." The next day, they turned up again. The assistant manager that actually interviewed me wasn't the person that took me out on my day of observation. So it was a guy who I later found out was an owner previously and was on retrain. Like a lot of the owners in the office, the office wasn't just run by Matt Stewart, who was the kind of overarching guy. There were a number of owners operating out of the same office and a number of retraining owners at the same time as well. So I went on an interview with these. They paired us all up. I think there was like 6 or 7 of us, and there were maybe 7 leaders and above looking for new recruits, as you can imagine. So they paired us all up, and I got paired with this guy called Paul Sandu, and he was a Scottish guy. He was very amicable, sharp, very, very, very personable, very happy, very salesy. I'll give you that. He could sell the job, and he was a talker, which I found out during the day. jumped on a train, went to a place called Rotherham, which is maybe a 30-minute, 20-minute train ride away from Sheffield. So it wasn't actually in the city centre itself. It was in a town nearby. Paired us up. He gave me some very menial tasks. I mentioned in the email, name 100 ways a company can market to you. And at the time, I was thinking, is this just a test? Which, of course, it was a test. It was a way of keeping you there. It was also a way of, seeing how obedient you are, because actually during the day, there were a number of people who just stood up and walked away. At which point, that should have been a red flag as well, that people were also not interested in the opportunity. But I saw it and I thought, this to kind of go back, they were doing a charity campaign, and I'm not sure which kind of charity it was. Something it may have been, Royal Society for the Blind or something along those lines. And they were literally standing there giving the kind of pitch to people who were walking by. It looked very easy. He was quite a smooth talker, so he obviously didn't have a challenge with bringing people to the podium. And yeah, it looked like a fairly simple operation. So I thought I could do this, even if it's a temporary thing until I get into ownership and run my own office and teach people how to do this. It'd be a very simple task. Yeah, definitely. He was a smooth talker. We then spent some time. He broke down the opportunity for me. We talked about how much money I'll be earning in 6 months, how long it's going to take me to open up my own office, and these messages that aren't just specific to Credico, they're across the broad spectrum of companies that I imagine originated from the same place. So broke it down. Took me back to Sheffield after the day. We discussed it, and he said, "Look, this is your third round interview. I want to know if you want the job or not." But I remember very distinctly, we were in like a stairway. It was like two floors up, and he was at the bottom of the stairway, and I was at the top. And he said, "So this is your third round interview. I just want to know if you want the job or not. I can appreciate, it's completely up to you, whatever you want, but we'd like you to work here." And I said, "Yeah, great." So interview process was quite funny. There were a lot of people who were in leadership at the time who were like 18, 19, who had clearly had not had the break in life that they needed. Some of them were very intelligent people, but for some reason or another got hooked into the opportunity in a similar way that I did. And yeah, so then I was a cog in the wheel at that point. Told me, "Come in the next day. You'll be here from 7:30, and we'll start." I guess one thing that I just wanted to mention is that people that are in this business aren't bad people. I don't think that the people are bad. I think that the whole concept of the business is polluting people. That's what it does. It just makes people overly ambitious, overly kind of focused on goals. And for context, I went through a sales training process after I finished with Credico. I said, "I'm done with this, but I want to stay with sales." They went to a specialist organization that does all this stuff. And they did, along with getting a job, I actually got some training courses associated as well, which were like residential training courses. Throughout my time on these residential training courses, I met probably 10 or 15 people who had also been through a Credico-like experience. They even knew the names. They knew the names of the people that I was talking about. So we really bonded over that kind of thing. And it just shows you where people lead in life. Some really intelligent, highly motivated people are in this business. So if I tell you about my first day, it was particularly interesting because of the reasons you've said. I turned up expecting to be on a charity campaign with a very well-refined pitch. Everyone was saying the same thing. Everyone was doing the same thing. The key metrics were exactly the same. How many people can you bring to the podium? How many people can you get to sign up? How many people can you get to kind of to the closing stage after you've signed up as well? So it was very refined. They knew the metrics, which were obviously lower than they were saying initially. Then I remember just starting to pick up, the first kind of 5 steps of the conversation, building impulse throughout the whole thing. And the owner of the office kind of dragged me and Paul in, who was actually my leader at the time, dragged me and Paul, a number of assistant managers in the room. we jumped on this call with what I remember to be the sales manager from a company called Clear Business. And I can't remember who I said was on the call, but it was definitely a senior figure within Credico. It was clearly like a kick-off meeting for how the sales campaign was going to be going. And we all sat there studiously taking notes, as we've been told, have a strong student mentality as the messaging goes through. And then they closed the call off and said, right, we're the first in this country to be starting this campaign. It gave us the context around it. And probably about 3 months earlier, there was a governmental shift. So within the UK, businesses could now pick their supplier for water, water utility. And this was a keen opportunity that they wanted to exploit. And so this Clear Business was trying to shift people from their incumbent water supplier to the new water supplier. It was our job to go out there and convince them that was the right thing to do. And we were told, here are your key benefits. And the key benefits were no change to your water supply, and we'll save you 5% on any water bill that you have currently, which was a blatant lie. It was completely fabricated. So we sat around and we had a lot of pitches to build on. So it wasn't like it was completely as from scratch as maybe you'd imagine. There's a lot of the key techniques that were exactly the same. There's one line that I naively thought back, and I think about this and go, I had no sales experience. I didn't have any marketing experience, and there was me trying to devise a pitch to get people to buy from me, which was part and parcel of why I didn't do very well in business. I could be very honest and say that it wasn't an environment that suited me, and the pitch was terrible. So we sat around the table. And we said, what kind of buzz phrases can we use? And I remember throwing one out there that was, if you can save 5%, if we offered you 5% off of your rent, you would take that, right? And obviously everyone would say, yeah, sure. So why would you not take that off of your water bill as well? And some of these places that we'd go and sell to eventually were like charity shops, independent charity shops whose water consumption was flushing the toilet twice a day, or turning the tap on to get a glass of water. So very hard sell.
All right. So you said one of the lines you said. So let's go back to this whole thing. So you were on this conference call with Clear Business because, like you said, the UK deregulated their water services, and just like vultures. You have these people coming in and trying to make money off of it. You said one of the key lines from that pitch was the 5%. You're going to say 5%, but you said that was a blatant lie. So how did that line? You're thinking about this freshly, right? This is a pitch that you're coming up with from the ground up, using the techniques. Making sure you have the 5 steps and the impulse factors and all that. But it's a brand new pitch. How does that get through if it's something that's just blatantly not true?
Good question. It didn't go through for a long time. Some people were very questioning of the statistics. They said, I'd like some case studies. I'd like to see proof, see businesses that have done the same. Can you tell me anyone who has done it recently?
Yeah.
Of course, the Jones effect is the guy down the road just did it.
Yeah.
And that was part of the pitch as well. So we just signed up 3 people today. They're all saving 5%. Why aren't you saving 5%? And the pitch morphed over time because, as you can imagine, each of the salespeople had no specific pitch to go off. So they all devised their own. And whoever was ringing bell, or as close to ringing bell as you can. I mean, that was like, ringing bell was like 3 sales. And for a sale, it was 30-something pounds, I think. So it was like $45 or something along those lines. So not a lot of money at all. And we were expecting to be making maybe 10 sales a day. And the person who was ringing bell was maybe 2 or 3 sales a day. And he was just a leader. So the assistant managers were not making sales. The ex-owners of businesses weren't making sales. But this one leader did, and he just had a technique of doing it. It did help that we went to his hometown, and he knew a lot of the people that owned the small businesses around there as well. So I think he signed up like 4 or 5 on time, and that was people he knew.
Yeah.
So as far as how did it go? Well, clearly not very well. I didn't work very well at all.
I keep hearing horror stories from the door-to-door or business-to-business, same thing, environment world of Credico and Sidcore and whatever. And you know, you talked a little bit about the same thing. What were some of the things you experienced going door to door for this campaign? And what was one of the driving factors that kept you there, even experiencing, you know, not making any money and all these other things?
Naivety, stubbornness, actually really good quality that makes a good salesperson, to be honest.
Yeah,
But,
right. Yeah,
but an inability to kind of, you know, rub off the negatives. You know, the whole mantra they get you into. You're immersed in, you know, people telling you every day, you know, be positive. This will come through eventually. You know, we're on the cutting edge of this, and this is going to be your future. You're going to be the first owner of an office of this caliber. Everyone wanted that. Everyone wanted to make the first office that exclusively did this business, and that was a good driver because I was a new guy and I knew I had more to me than the others did. I thought that, you know, clearly everyone has their own skills, but I thought that I could do a better job than them. That kept me there. A number of horror stories. You know, there's a you know, a road trip to London that I'm sure we'll get into at some point, which was just one giant horror story. The main horror stories for me were, you know, getting through 2 pairs of shoes in like 4 weeks or something like that. The soles literally wore out because I was walking so much. I almost broke. I almost said, I'm done with this. I'm not doing this anymore. And someone turned around and said, you know, go to this next business. You put your positivity on. You put all this negativity behind you. And you can achieve the sale. And so I just went, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to pull away all the negatives. Walked in, made the sale. Which is probably the worst thing that happened to me at that time. I went in overly positive, and the guy lapped it up. It was a perfect storm of things that kept me there. You know, and we were a team. You know, we were all. And I realize this now. We were all in the same position. None of us were earning money.
Yeah.
And I got on really well with them because we spent so much time together. It was a practically male-dominated team with one female. I can't for the life of me remember her name, but she was French, and she was hooked onto this idea that Credico didn't operate in France, and she wanted to be the first person to be in France. She wanted to open up the first office in Paris, see her mum every day, and these are the kind of things, you know, it's the F's, you know. She had family on the mind, and that's exactly what they went for. For me, it was, you know, also family, providing for my wife, my now wife, my then girlfriend, and providing. There was probably a little bit of selfishness there as well, which is exacerbated when you're in the business. It's about, you know, what can you do? There is no kind of we are a team and we are trying to achieve this. It's like you against you. You are competitive. So that kept me there. Walking a long time. I lost a lot of weight. I don't have any photos to show you. I wouldn't want any photos to be shown at that time. I looked awful, very thin, wearing the same suit every day, because that's what they ask you to do. You know, there were some people that would walk into the business and would wear no blazer and no trousers or no shoes, or they'd wear, you know, something that was a little bit different from the rest of the guys who were wearing, you know, very skinny suits and looked the job, that they were there as hype men to impress. And and every day the owner wore his kind of his Cartier watch and walked in and said, you know, you want one of these, you work hard and you get here. Actually, his story really resonated with me. For anyone who knew his story, which I heard many times, I even looked on his LinkedIn profile. This is Matt Stewart, who's the owner. He studied a very similar fashion to what I did. So I studied chemistry, And he did something very similar, worked in a lab for a while, and then realized that they didn't want to do that, and then got into the business. And the whole story resonated with me. I said, I can see myself doing exactly that.
In your message, and you just brought up one of the names, but in your message, you brought up two names. You brought up Matt Stewart, who was your owner, and then you also brought up Josh Cote, who is a big higher up in Credico.
Yeah.
And you talked about the way they flaunt their success. You talked about the Cartier watch. You mentioned how Josh would park his Bentley Continental in front of the office to try to give people, a goal to reach or something like that. You spent a little bit of time with these guys. What are they like? Do you get the sense that they're authentic? Do you get the sense that they have a soul left? Who are these guys?
I can't say too much about Josh Cote. Don't know him personally. I saw him on the road trip when we went to London. And here's a perfect example. The first time I saw him, we were going through the impact meeting in the morning. Someone was writing on the whiteboard as everybody does, and we would shout juice at the top of our voices and all that kind of cringeworthy stuff. And pops his head in the door, literally says, "What's going on?" Someone said impact, and he just shouted, or he didn't even shout. Everyone was listening to him so intently, like waiting on his word. They saw him in the corner because everyone wanted to spend time with him. And he said, he said like 5 words, 6 words. He was like, "High roller gets a new suit, courtesy of me. We'll go to Oxford Street." And everyone was buzzing about that because he was this symbol of wealth, opulence, success, what you can do when you work hard. This American that's kind of absolutely right at the top of this business, and he's in the center of London making all the sales, running like hundreds of people. If you looked out towards his offices, he had hundreds of people right underneath him. And Matt Stewart, I obviously knew a little bit more because I saw him pretty much daily, except when we went to London. He would always walk in with a Starbucks. I even questioned whether he went to Starbucks in the morning. He probably filled the coffee cup up with coffee that he got from his penthouse suite, wherever. He was one of these people where there's a very distinct culture of these guys. They're like alpha males. They think they are very much like everyone wants to be them and everyone wants to be with them. It's that kind of mindset. And he would tell us all these stories about the money that he was going to make. It was around the time where Conor McGregor was fighting Floyd Mayweather, and he said, I'm taking my dad to Vegas to go and watch that boxing match. And everyone's like, yeah, great. That's exactly what we want. Never happened, obviously. The business opportunity is too much at the moment. He's got so much work doing.
So much work. Yeah, he can't get away at all. Poor guy.
I know. Well, he can't even take a break, and no one took a break. I was very insistent, and I actually find myself quite unique in this situation. I was told by my wife, "You don't work on a Saturday, and you're not working on a Sunday. You do it night. You do a lot of hours, and you don't do anything outside of Monday to Friday." So I didn't do work. I didn't do weekend. Didn't do one at all. It might have been a contributing factor to me not being successful, but in my mind, and currently I don't work more than 38 hours a week or something like that. And if I do, I get compensated for it, which is fantastic. But you don't in that business. It's as many sales as you make, that's your money. So he was cutthroat, and I remember there's probably another name that you may have heard a few times. A guy called Justin Cobb. So he's this very eccentric. Let's call him eccentric. And I'm gonna have to stop saying this, but he's an American guy, and for us Brits, Americans are, rambunctious and flamboyant and whatever.
Yeah.
So, towards when I'd finished in the business, I started watching some looking out for him because I'd heard his name. I started looking out for some of his videos on YouTube, and there was one channel that recorded a lot of his motivational speeches, which were like 50 minutes long. And I sat and critiqued them. And I said, how have I been indoctrinated in this way? And they were all, changing your mentality and, how to have a strong work ethic and, all these generic titles that really were how can we push this propaganda onto you? One of them he was doing was at a senior leaders and owners kind of conference. And there we go. The person's got a camera sat on their desk, ready to record him. And who sat right in front of the camera is Matt Stewart. And when you get that kind of environment where everybody is alpha dog, everyone is owners, so they all know the regime, they all know the game, whether they're blind to it and we're just so indoctrinated into it, or whether they actually knew that this is exactly what they're doing. You know, they're spitefully going out of their way to make people to make money. Some of the comments that he said to questions which Justin said out to the team, his responses referred to people that worked for him as distributors, for example. So he would refer to his employees or his teams as distributors, which is an interesting one because I've never heard them being referred to in that way. But it really does show the mentality of what he thinks of his team, which is you are here to push goods that we need to push, whether that's subscriptions to charities, whether it's subscriptions to water services, or whether that's there was no physical merchandise, but certainly financial services were one of the offices that operated out of our physical office. So to answer your question, I don't know much about Josh Cote, only the things that I witnessed whilst I was in London. But Matt Stewart definitely knew what he was doing. He definitely is out there to make money, and he is not out there to give people the opportunity. He's out there to step on necks, and he is out there to kind of get that done.
You're not the only one. I mean, if you Google, I know Matt Stewart or Matthew Stewart is kind of a general name, but if you Google Matthew Stewart and Credico, or actually you listed a couple of the companies that he was known for. One of them was called Atlas Corp. It was Atlas Corp or Atlas Outsourcing, which is no longer in business. That no longer exists. He is now with OGC Holdings, which is public information. It's on his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And if you Google Matt Stewart and any of these other company names, I mean, there are Reddit posts. There are many others that talk about the scams of these companies. One that I looked at right now, Scam Company Recruiting in Glasgow, so another UK, and Matthew Stewart's name is tied to this. And it's so crazy about how all these names keep coming up, because Justin Cobb, I've heard his name has been featured in other interviews that we've done. Josh Cote, at the time this is being recorded, the video hasn't been published yet, but it will be once this video airs. He's basically a landlord. He owns he has some real estate holdings where some offices, he owns some buildings where offices, owners can open up in offices. So, that's another way he makes money, is that he just charges rent to these people.
Well, when I kind of was trying to find out a little bit more about them, so I could go through the campaign of trying to stop these guys from doing what they're doing. I'm sure we'll get to that point again later.
Yeah.
But when I started to research these guys, I used the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is public information of all businesses in the UK that are registered.
Yeah.
You could look at the financial returns of these guys for the past 3 or 4 years. Not saying that they've been open for 3 or 4 years, because as you know, they shut down and reopen and shut down and diversify and get reabsorbed into another business.
Sure.
And the whole, I have to credit the Credico team. They're very good at hiding what they want to do.
Oh, definitely.
But I found financial records of what Matt Stewart had. And, he had 50k in the bank at the time, which is significantly less than what he was saying, which was like he had hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
But to be honest, £50,000, if I had that in my bank account, I'd be fairly happy with it. And where he lived, it was my understanding that the owners rented out apartments each throughout the city. I never saw Matt Stewart's apartment, but I did know that it was a very high-rise apartment, potentially even penthouse. which was a significant statement over the other owners in the office who had, smaller apartments, all with people living with them. And this kind of resonated with me quite clearly when I went back to one of these kind of places that they live. And because I liked the guys that I worked with, so we ended up going out for a drink on these teams nights. I went back to their place to kind of, they were freshening up, and I was just going straight out. And the only thing I can describe it was like student halls, so student accommodation, dorm rooms, and there would be 3 people in pretty much every single room in a corridor with about maybe 10 rooms or so. And to my understanding, they were all Credico employees across down the entire hall. They all knew each other. And I think that these were, flexible. So it wasn't a case of, so you live here now, here's your permanent address. It was a case that, you sleep here and you come to the office, and if we want to relocate the office, if we want you to move to Glasgow, to Manchester, to London, then you will move and you'll live in very similar accommodation. So
that's incredible.
It was something else. But again, you don't get shown that on day one. You don't get said, oh, here are all the employees and here's all the money we're not making and here's where we live, because that would have scared me. But the accommodation was a real sad story now looking back on it. And I was actually still party to it. So when we went on our road trip to London, I didn't have much money at the time, and travelled to London on the bus, which for anyone in the UK will know Megabus. It's like £8 for a return journey to London or something. But kicker is you have to get on the bus at 4:05 in the morning, and you arrive at 8 o'clock, and they do silly times. So spend some money on going get the bus and a return journey to the centre of London, to then realise I had to buy a tube ticket because we were misinformed about where we were staying. That was my understanding, that we would be staying in the middle of London in maybe a nice flat or something like that, or maybe the hotel was paid for me. This wasn't translated information. We jump on a train that is an hour and a half train to the outskirts of London, which is what everybody in London does, because it's a city centre. You commute in, and it's cheaper to live there than it is to kind of live in the centre. And so we turn up to this house, which is not only a train ride away, but a bus as well. So it was a train, a bus, and then maybe a 5-minute or 10-minute walk to our accommodation. It turns out the house was owned by the owner, not the owner. Turned out my leader, his family owned the property, was subletting out one of the rooms. So one of the rooms was locked up, and somebody was in there who we didn't know. We'd never been told that we were coming, but we just turned up. And there was one other bedroom and a living room and a kitchen with no utilities. So there was fresh water, so I could brush my teeth. Having a shower was a challenge because I don't think that they paid the hot water bill. And there was no carpets or anything. There was no carpets. It was all wooden flooring, but not nice wood flooring. It was splintering. There was a bed in one of the rooms, and that was it. No duvet. No, there was a mattress, but no duvet, some sheets, no pillows. And the expectation was that I had to share the bed. I had to share the bed with one of the people that was supposed to be my professional colleague. And that was a very low point for me. And one of the points where I realized, this is really not what it's cut out to be. All this fancy, I'm so far removed from the situation that I thought I was going to be in. And at that point I felt, is this what not achieving in this business looks like? Because if I have to suffer through this to get to the penthouse suite in London, I'll do it. And that's how warped my mindset was at that time. That's how warped everyone's mindset is. We're all sat there thinking, what an opportunity we've got to sit in the middle of London and share a takeaway meant for one person between 3 of us. I had no money. So by the end of the trip, I didn't eat lunch on any of the days. one of the times I was the closest I was to leaving. I was almost on the bus. Now, don't forgive myself for not getting on the bus. And the leader was there. It was Paul. He turned around and said, you can't be leaving. We need this too much. This opportunity is everything to us. And actually, then his mindset shifted. He kind of then, it's the 2 no's and a go kind of thing. And then I said, no. And then he said, oh, great, fine, do what you want. This opportunity is only for the top 10% of people or whatever. That was what got me to stay. Him walking away was me saying, no, you're not walking away from me. I want this. And he said, and then he turned around and said, what's it going to take for you to stay? I said, I need to eat. That's what I need right now. I need food. And we walked into a Nando's, which is like a Portuguese peri-peri chicken thing. There's in the UK. I don't know if it is in America at all, to be honest. So the UK watchers will know that one. But he sat me down. We had chicken, we had fries, and he said, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. We can't. He ran the spiel. He did it. I stayed for another day or two, and then left after that. But it's just so emotionally difficult. Yeah.
You mentioned if you're sitting in that house with cold running water, and that's about it, and you're thinking, if I have to suffer through this, or your words were, if this is what not achieving looks like, but it's kind of also what achieving looks like, because in this,
I wouldn't know, Alex.
Exactly. In Credico, I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who's living the life that they're advertising. Like you said, based on your research, Matt Stewart had like 50K in the bank. That's nice. Having 50K in the bank is great, but if you're as rich and successful as you say you are in Credico, you better have about 10 times as much as 50K in the bank. You're just lying to everybody if you've got 50K in the bank and you think you are putting forth an honest assessment of your success.
And that 50K could have been saved over a number of years. It could have been
exactly.
The guy had. It
probably wasn't just 1 year. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it could have been absolutely anything. And the earning potential that they say is like, they just said 100K. They said, assistant manager is going to be earning 100K. And that is going to be salary plus whatever you sell.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's what that's your first milestone. Actually, your first milestone, as you're well aware, is you become team leader, and then they tell you some of the secrets of the business.
Yeah.
You're no longer an entry-level rep. You are trying to build a team around this model that we built. But for me, that wasn't really a step. That was like, okay, so I know I'm just going to be back in the field because everyone else around me is back in the field.
Yeah.
The real thing for me was being an assistant owner, sitting there doing interviews and earning 100K. Or salary plus earning. So getting a salary was really where I was at. And I continually told family and friends and said, I'm going to make it up. I'm going to get to this point and I'm going to be salaried. And that's when it's going to really kick off. And that's when I'm going to own my own office. And I remember, funnily enough, one of the morning meetings that they had, first question that comes out of Matt Stewart's mouth. So who here has been told that this is a pyramid scheme? And I'm going, pyramid scheme? I wasn't thinking this was a pyramid scheme. What are you talking about? People's hands are raising all around me, and I'm thinking, what? How is this a pyramid scheme? Matt, tell me how this is a pyramid scheme. And they went through the whole, okay, right, let's break down McDonald's. How many employees work at McDonald's that are fry cooks? How many employees are supervisors? How many are managers? And how many own the franchise? Oh, wow. Wouldn't you know, it looks like a pyramid. Oh, so every business is a pyramid scheme. And he said, I did this once for a girl who worked at McDonald's and told me that I was in a pyramid scheme. And, everyone was cheering and shouting, hollering. It was, looking back on it, because I'd heard that 3 times by the time I'd left. And it was just hilarious. And one of my friends, as soon as he heard me giving the breakdown of the business, he said, that's a pyramid scheme. I was like, what are are you talking about? This isn't a pyramid scheme. Yeah, it's a pyramid scheme. And then I said, and then I said, oh yeah, every business is a pyramid scheme. And then he just laughed. And he said, what are you talking about? Ah, humiliated me. This guy worked for himself, so he didn't have the pyramid scheme argument to really relate to.
Yeah.
But he said it that way. He said, I work for myself. I don't earn a tremendous amount of money, but I dictate where I spend my time and I dictate where that money goes. And don't treat my employees like distributors, in the words of Matt Stewart. So that was a good wake up call, but that wasn't the wake up call. I don't know what the wake up call was. I think it was hearing the meeting for the third time.
Yeah.
And then I remember someone said, yeah, one of the leaders or one of the leaders that was in my team said, oh, Kris, where are you going? Caught me as I was leaving. And I said, oh yeah, I just need to go to the toilet. And sprinted down the stairs, sprinted out of the building, got on a tram. Didn't know where it was going, but I got on it anyway. And I just didn't want them to follow me. And then I got a text later saying, where did you go? And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And he said, this was Paul at this time. Where are you going? I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And he said, fair enough. It's up to you. We just wanted to give you the opportunity. And that was pretty much the end of my employment, really.
Your story is incredible, because you're just to unpack some of the stuff. So going back to the pyramid scheme argument, so eloquently made by Matthew Stewart. Any group whose survival and in which you find yourself, where your own personal survival depends on recruiting other people, that is a pyramid scheme, Matthew. You are in a pyramid scheme.
Here's your time to educate, Matt.
Exactly. Oh, I would love to get Matt Stewart, Josh Cote, Justin Cobb, all these other big wigs from Sidcore, Credico. Yeah, let's do a Zoom meeting. Do a virtual Zoom meeting.
We'll sit them all together and
we'll stream it live. We'll stream it live on YouTube so they can answer the tough questions.
If you can pull that off, Alex, I'll 100% be sharing that.
If I could pull that off, I'll retire tomorrow. That'd be great. But no, that's so ridiculous. The ridiculous how they try to justify, well, any business is a pyramid scheme. Okay, if you shape a business, any business has the shape of a pyramid, right? Because you have the person in charge and so on and so forth. But you don't have, if I worked at McDonald's or where I work now, the school I work now, they're not telling me, hey, in order for you to teach next year, you have to bring in 4 other people to do this job. That's not how business works. That's not how any legitimate business works, that's how Credico works. That's how Sidcore, Smart Circle, Cobra Group, that's how these cults, let's call them what they are, these cults work. Without that recruitment, they would die. And it's not the same as just hiring people. Like if there's a vacancy where I work, they go through a process, they screen people, they bring in qualified candidates, and one person gets chosen, not 12 people who have no background in any of this, and they're forced out on the street to do this nonsense. And you brought up the word distributor. You said that, who said that? Was it Matt that said that, or Justin who said that?
So people don't come up with these terms on their own.
No, yeah.
So the only way that I would think that the Matt would respond in that way, with a very specific word that is not what I would consider an accurate description,
True.
Is if he's been told by somebody to say that, or he's heard it. So he's heard this from, the likes of Boyd Parker, another big name in the UK, Credico business.
Yeah.
Ben Lambert. These kind of guys are just, the people that people want to surround themselves with because they portray this lifestyle.
Sure.
So Matt said it, but only from what I can tell is parroted.
Yeah, of course. And honestly, the reason I brought that up was because the only time I've ever seen the word distributor was when I was doing research for the film, and I used Robert Fitzpatrick's research on a website called Pyramid Scheme Alert. And that is one of the words he uses, distributors, to describe how pyramid schemes and multi-level marketing operations, MLMs, function. So could it be a coincidence that one of the heads of Credico used the word used to describe a pyramid scheme MLM operation, and he's one of the lead defenders of saying it's not a pyramid scheme?
I'll let you make that link.
I don't think that's a coincidence. Yeah.
I agree. You know, Matt Stewart was definitely regarded by the top levels as that almost the next consultant. You know, the next guy coming through. He's the next wave of kind of guys coming through, and he had, they definitely had those vibes from him. The people that he surrounded himself with, not from a top level, but from an assistant manager and other owners. The whole lot of them were hard to describe. They were hard to describe, but if I was to describe them, alpha males. They're just, that's exactly how they were.
Or at least giving the impression of being alpha males.
Of course.
And just describing some of the things that you described, being in the flop house, being unable to feed yourself, literally starving yourself because you're working all this time, but they're not paying you. You can't afford to eat. And then escaping your job, like what you described, running down the hallway and boarding a tram. That is what I've heard Scientologists do to get out of the cult of Scientology, is literally leaving, like bolting full speed to get out of where they're being kept, where they're being literally imprisoned by the cult, and not looking back and hoping that no one's following you. It's a job that you're escaping from. It's not a cult. But all of these aspects that you're talking about, how is Credico not a cult? If you can condition someone that it's okay to work 80 hours a week and not be afford to feed oneself, that it's okay to go to these strange houses, not even hotels, these houses that you don't even know, and there's someone locked up in the room, renting a room. You don't know who that could be. You might find them standing over you while you're sleeping at night. You don't know who that person is. No hot running water, no utilities. And to quit your job, you knew that if you went in again and talked to Matthew or talked to Paul and said, I think I'm going to quit, you knew that they were going to try to get you to stay. You knew that they were going to try to sell you something and use the language of the business to try to get you to stay. So you literally had to escape from this business.
That's right. And that's not the way. You should never. I've never left a business on such bad terms.
That's not how any business, any legitimate business does not operate like that. If I worked at McDonald's, since they like to name drop McDonald's, it's supposed to be this horrible place to work. If I want to quit, I can just say I quit, and they'll be like, okay,
well,
good luck, have fun. That's it.
Person to fill your boots.
Yeah.
Which actually, maybe I shouldn't make that link, because then they're just going to use this later to say, oh yeah, everyone at McDonald's is unqualified, so don't worry about it. So yeah, I mean, what they might do at McDonald's is they might turn around and say, is this really the last resort? You really want to quit? We think you're a valuable employee. We've gone through this training. Is this something that you want to do? And then if you say yes, they'll go, fine, here's the paperwork. Here's how you leave. We'll help you to leave if you don't want to be here. And good luck and best of wishes. And then what we'll do is we'll pay you for the time that you spent. That's another point I'd like to make to you, Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say, you did bring that up when you left. You were still waiting on payment, right? But you wanted to take action.
I absolutely did. So I sat and waited on payment, and picking up from when I text Paul to say I'm leaving, he said, fine, fair enough. We just wanted to give you the opportunity. 2 days later, I was expecting payment. It was like every Thursday, I think. So I gave it a day. It's Thursday, didn't get paid. It was Friday, didn't get paid. This was when I knew I had to take some action. I couldn't just let this lie. And at this point, I still thought it was a genuine business. I thought, this is horrible, but I think they're still obliged to pay you, right? How wrong I was. Took force. It took me working with a family friend who works in HR in a very senior position. So understands these situations very well, and understands how bad it is. So when I approached them to say, can we write something up, formal complaint, something that is evidence of me taking in some formal complaint, he said, sure, write something up. How much evidence do you have of sales? I have all of these sheets that were carbon copied across, and there was probably like 6 or 7. So, it was probably a good 2 weeks for me. I'll be honest. I then totaled it up, and it was probably about £200 worth of cash. I wrote to him and said, in very formal language, this is how much you owe me. If it's not paid by this time, or this day, then I'll be taking legal action and proceeding to take you to a claims court from an employment tribunal perspective. Receptionist was there, who I knew. I'd spoken to a number of times. There were 3 or 4 admins in there at the time, bringing recruits in, welcoming them. There were probably 8 or 9 people sat around on the sofas. And I didn't even speak to the receptionist to start with. I knocked on Matt's door and proceeded to enter. It was locked. So he's locked his office. There was nobody in there. And the receptionist said, can I help you? And I said, you need to put this in Matt Stewart's hands by the end of today, or I'll be dropping another one in to his hand tomorrow. And she said, yeah, okay, I'll help. No, sure, I'll get that in. Because actually, the admins are, as we know, the admins are a similar position to the distributors. Yep. Distributors. They have their own systems. And the receptionist, she doesn't care. She's getting paid £8 an hour to sit there and say hello to people. So they took the letter, and I turned around and I said to everybody, I was like, you cannot work here. This is not legitimate. They will not pay you. I handed in the letter to say they need to pay me, otherwise they need to, we'll take some action on this. And I think most of the people in there just didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. It was sat waiting for what they thought was an opportunity for a job with this place that everybody looks great, everybody's wearing nice suits, and everybody so positive. And they've seen it and gone, how, why? Is that red? That's a red flag. That is one red flag. So I can only hope that they got no applicants through that day. I can only hope. And for a small time, I lived very close to the office in my home. So it was a walk to the office. And for a very small time, I stood outside the office on mornings when I knew people were going in to interview. So from maybe like 8:30 to 9 onwards. And I would just stand out there for an hour and just say, I used to work here and I want to share with you, what I used to do. And if you're okay with that, then there's an opportunity waiting for you upstairs. If you are not okay with that, I would suggest that you just don't turn up, because they won't even know that you are not coming, because they expect that. There's leakage. Mm-hmm. I think they call it in the business like slippage or something like that. People that they expect to turn up that aren't going to turn up, that they know won't turn up because of the percentages of people that turn up. So that was positive. Didn't stop there. Actually got another job very quickly through the means I explained. And I was on a couple of training courses during that week, so I had some downtime. And in between the courses, I would look at their job applications on the likes of Indeed, Total Jobs, etc. And they would all be the same, sports marketing. No, well, I don't know where they got that from.
No sports.
I don't know why sports marketing works so well, because you go in there, it's very clearly not sports. But anyway, marketing, entry-level sales, sales position, remote working, all sorts of things that are just going to pull people in. Reported them all to Indeed and LinkedIn. Just Eat. That's not the one. Pick 2 of the 3. They're the real ones. But anyway, there wasn't enough. They weren't taking down the adverts quick enough. And they weren't taking the adverts down at all, because the revenue that they generated from the likes of these Credico subsidiaries must be, a phenomenal amount, because there's 6 or 7 posts per company.
Yeah.
So I took screenshots of the application and I wrote to the Advertising Standards Agency. Had a very interesting case with a woman who helped me from the Advertising Standards Agency, put my case together. And she said, "Where's your evidence? All these live links." I said, "Here are 5 links to a company that have different role descriptions based in them, and I have worked there and know that they are the same. And nowhere in these applications does it say that they have to, they don't pay you. It's not salaried, it's commission only." They didn't say it anywhere. I looked a couple of weeks later, I got an email back saying, "Yeah, thanks for your complaint. Your case has been submitted and is successful. We have written specifically to the owner of the business, Matthew Stewart, to explain the situation and give him the opportunity to make the changes to the application, to the job applications." I said, "Okay, what's happening in the meantime?" She said, "Well, we've asked him to take the applications down. We've spoken to Indeed and Total Jobs and whoever to consider change in policy and make it explicit that they have to write no salary and commission only." But the challenge was, so advertising standards have one way of working, but Indeed and Total Jobs have their own terms of service. Mm-hmm. So in their terms of service, they didn't say anything around, having to say how much you make. You can give a figure of what people might make. So there was a bit of a conflict there, and they explained that what they'd done is they'd also written to the companies to say, "Can you consider a change of policy, a change of terms of service?" And the advertisements for the job roles were deleted. As a result, I couldn't find them for about a week, which I thought, great, there's a week's worth of people there that haven't applied for this job and potentially been suckered into something that I myself had done. A week later, I started to see them coming back up, and they were worded in such a way that now it was explicit that it was commission only. But it was framed in a way that was very nice. Now, you'll work as hard as you can because you get paid on the work that you do. And there was that kind of phrasing. And I said, that's not good enough. That's really not good enough. These people are looking for a job. Some of these people are desperate. I've met so many desperate people in this business. I met so many people who were just like me, naive, didn't do their research. But it wasn't enough. And I opened another case and I said, this is the same thing happening again. It's not clear enough. And the response I got back this time was, that's clear enough for us as the Advertising Standards Agency. It's clear for the terms of service of Indeed, Total Jobs. It's clear along their lines. So unfortunately, this time we're not going to be able to do anything about it. And at this point, I realized all it needed was them to change a few words in the application. And I've made no impact other than a week's worth of applicants not going their way, and perhaps probably a small dent in their advertising budget. But that was a bit heartbreaking for me. It was at that point where I really started to get deep on the research and came across the Devil Court website. And the first 10 lines that they have a checklist of how do you know you're in a Devil Court. Yep. One of them was shouting juice. And I was like, I got drawn in. And the one thing that actually drew me in was the photos page, the naming and shaming. Yep. And the moment I saw someone on there that was someone that I thought I'd seen, I was like, how have I been suckered into this so deeply when there's this wealth of information available? There was a hard realization. It was at this point where I had my own things going on. I ended up getting married, and my job was being quite successful at the time. So I kind of let it go. And you know what, Alex, between us, I think I regret letting it go.
Yeah. Well, now I want to say bravo to you first, because you took a lot of extra steps that you didn't need to take, and I'm not just talking about you getting paid, but you took an effort to try to, inform people, try to prevent them from being suckered into this. And going back to your question, or you wondering, how did you get suckered in when there's so much information? Yeah, there's a lot of information out there, but how do you get to it? Like you can, if you put in the right search terms on the internet, you could probably arrive at the conclusion that this job you're in or job you're applying for is kind of scammy. But if you're going into it without that doubt, if you're thinking, well, this is an incredible opportunity, or like you said, if you're desperate, you're searching for work and you haven't gotten any other yeses, and this is the first company that said, we want you for an interview, you're not going to go into it probably thinking, I wonder if this is a scam. No, you're
No.
thinking, oh my gosh, I have an interview. I might actually be able to afford my rent this month if I get this job, you know? So yeah, the information's out there, but if you're not looking for it, or if you don't have a reason to look for it, you're probably not going to find it. So, and you're not the only person. I get emails from hundreds of people, probably every month at this point, and you know, a lot of them share the same feelings. You know, how could I get suckered into this? You know, I'm an intelligent person. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a master's degree like I do, or if you have barely a high school education like some other people. Anybody can get suckered into this because of the manipulation. And I think the example you gave at the end about the different wording, yeah, the job ads were changed, but the wording was framed in such a way to make it sound okay when you know that it's still not good enough. It's still going to attract people that are desperate. It's still going to get these hooks into these people that are very vulnerable. And unfortunately, there's only so much we can do. You know, like I would love to be able to get these videos and Devil Corp and Juicy Rhino's Instagram page in front of every single person, every single college graduate, so that they know exactly what to look for. But I know that's not realistic. And I know people are going to make, you know, everybody has to make their own decisions. Everybody's going to make their mistakes. You know, my 15 months in it were, you know, a year that I lost. I remember very little from the year that I lost in Smart Circle. And that's my mistake. You know, I could have gotten out a lot earlier than I did, but I didn't. But you know, I've lived with that now, and I think and I have all of this success to prove it. So I'd like to thank Smart Circle, because you've made my life a lot better 6.5 years after the fact. But no, I mean, it's something that it affects everybody. And I think I don't want you to feel guilty about giving it up, because, you know, you yourself, before we started this interview, said that it's been a few years since you worked here. And even though it was for 2 months, you're still holding on to this, right? And
I mean, it's not one of the things that I value myself on. I don't hold on to things. I'm very quick to kind of you know, move on from things. My wife and I have a saying, you know, we don't let the sun go down on anger. We don't. I don't think I've been to bed in the time I've been married with an argument or any kind of festering feeling. You know, and I think I don't have any resentment towards this organization, other than I would say no overriding resentment. So it doesn't eat me. It doesn't eat me. I don't let it trouble me. One thing I do resent them for is making people's lives difficult, more difficult than they are. And it's not burning resentment. It's more a case of, I need this to stop. This needs to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is through sharing information in exactly the same way as you have. And, you know, Alex, I can't tell you how I stumbled across your video. I couldn't tell you. YouTube algorithms and what have you, search history, Google, big data, whatever you want to say, push your video in my direction. And it just so happens that the first time I watched it, I didn't believe it. I was like, how has this guy captured this amount of time that I've spent in the business? 2 months, granted, not very long. How has he captured everything in the exact same way that I felt it? And I watched it again and again and again and again and again and again, because the story resonated with me so much that I got an emotional reaction from the video that you posted. So, you know, I'd probably speak on behalf of everyone who's ever been in the business, just to say, you know, massive thanks. And your work has not gone underappreciated. Not only for the people that are leaving the business, but people like myself who left the business a while ago, just needed to know that other people felt the same way. And to be honest, I've really enjoyed hearing from others you know, the tirade of people that have kind of emailed you to say, you know, I want to speak about this. I want to speak openly and honestly. And some of the stories are crazy. I didn't know until I heard the story. Some of the owners, you know, specifically based out in America, that you've kind of spoken with, fascinating stories, and yeah, really interesting to hear. So yeah, it's a lot of information, and there can never be enough. There can never be enough.